Okay, welcome to you, John. Hi. Um, and I think we'll make a start. That's 25 too. So, huge welcome to everyone. Thanks for showing up. And welcome to Perry, who's going to be taking us through the talk shop offerings. So, I'm going to be hosting and helping out. And just going to start off with a little reminder about really what the Future Democracy Hub is aiming to do. Um, I think probably most of us here will probably agree that democracy is in something of a crisis, but many of the solutions, if not all, do already exist, just not very widespread in the culture, certainly not as widespread as we hope they will become. And we're very much about embedding those new democratic tools into the DNA of society, particularly to increase the cultural collective decision-making capability and participation. So all those that want to take part, and we realize there's a lot of disaffected people, can take part, and we can provide ways for them to feel included. So we're very much about building up a new solution rather than just tearing an old system down. So we really have to learn the craft, master it from some of the masters that are here today, and go out there and help manifest this. So our focus in the hub is very much about supporting that army of facilitators. Obviously, it's a inquiry and an action research project in itself to work out how exactly that will work, but we're keen to do everything we can. And ultimately, not just talk about democracy, but to get out there and do it and make it a reality. And that really requires us getting our hands dirty and getting in there and doing it. So hopefully you're all up for that. I'm going to hand over to Perry in a moment, but just a couple of practicalities. I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with. I know some of you are very familiar with Zoom, how it works. So generally stay muted in the open conversations so that we don't pick up any background noise. There's virtually none at the moment, so you're all being very good. And we will do a quick check-in and go off into little groups in a second just to say hello and introduce ourselves and say why we're here. We don't need to do Slido questions because we decided that 15 people was the cutoff for that, so we won't be using that, but you can use the chat area for asking any questions or making any comments. Obviously, once Perry's talked through the offerings, I think we can do this in a couple of stages, one main stage and then a little after stage. We'll pause for questions and then we'll look at the chat and we can pick up those questions from there. Okay, so that's pretty much it, unless there's anything from you, Perry, that you think I've forgotten.
Nope.
Okay, because we are, there's 10 of us here at the moment, so relatively small group, so we can just work together on making this work for everybody. My name's Paul, the coordinator of the Future Democracy Hub. Perry Walker is here from TalkShop. He'll say a little bit about himself as well when he starts introducing the kits. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we just thought it would be quite nice to, just for each group, just to say maybe a summary of, just one person does a summary. So room one, James, Liz, or Ola. Anybody want to volunteer to just to say basically why you are all here?
I don't know. Nobody wants to. No, we're quite different backgrounds. Liz was very exciting, or her story was very exciting. So I suggest she talks.
I think we're all really excited about future democracy. And I just shared a story that starting last year, I started building a group of facilitators here in New York. And I was so glad to hear that this group called themselves Facilitator Army. I feel really aligned with it, and I feel really glad to meet everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And you guys. Next group was Edwin, Elizabeth, and Carolina. Who wants to volunteer to summarize your reasons for being here?
Well, I'll go then. Caroline and I already know each other. We're working with the empathy circles for the XR, the Future Democracy Hub. And Elizabeth was very interested in citizens assemblies and doing a workshop and training and around that, learning how to do it and train other peoples in it. I don't know if I missed something.
Magic. Thanks very much, guys. Welcome to all of you. And finally, John, Perry, and Peter. Who wants to summarize on behalf of that group?
Oh, I can. So I think we came from very similar points of wanting to a lot of experience of working in trying to get democracy to work well, or trying to get democracy to be something which actually exists, rather than a mere fiction, and have been doing that for quite some time. And also, John mentioned a desire to do something that's a real contribution to XR without actually, getting arrested. So doing something in the background that's useful and valuable without necessarily being on the front line of police action.
Fabulous, yeah. That is one of the things that we are offering, isn't it? So, perfect. All right, thanks, guys. Liz, you mentioned about making a notes area. I didn't know exactly what you meant by that, but I've created a Google Doc, which if people want to just type notes into, there's a link for that in the chat. So if that's what you meant, if it's not, we can talk at the end. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Perry. I've met Perry probably over a year.
I don't see the link.
Oh, is it not there, is it? Okay, hold on.
But if every time a new person comes in, I don't think they see the latest, so we didn't.
Yeah. Just give me 2 seconds, I'll grab that. Copy it. Maybe because we just did the breakout rooms as well, that might muck it up. Okay, should be in there now.
Yeah, that's
Great. Yeah, so Perry and I have been kind of in connection probably a year and a half now, maybe a couple of years, something like that. I met one of his colleagues on a bench outside a democracy event about that time ago, and we suddenly basically decided we're both doing exactly the same thing almost. So it was very exciting, and we've worked a little bit together since then. And we used the TalkShop hacks in the first rebellion in April to great success. So those of you who are interested in helping out in the October rebellion coming up, these are some of the things that we'd likely be using. So hand over to Perry. Leave you in his capable hands.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Paul. Hello, everyone. In the moment, we're going to watch a video. The video was made by Paul. It's very short, but it covers everything I would otherwise say in 25 minutes. So it's a really good start. I'll then show you some of our materials. Then we'll have some time for any questions that you might have about them. Then I'm going to show you a tool that's slightly different from the rest. We'll discuss that. And then Paul and I would like to put a question or two back to you. Is this useful? What else would you like us to cover? All that sort of thing. And then maybe we'll come back with Paul back to October at the end. We allowed an hour and a half for this. With a relatively small number, we may not need that. We'll see. So let me now share my screen, and we will watch Paul's video, especially if I can remember what to press. Just a second. Where are we?
Shout if you need help, Perry.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
Hello,
Everybody, it's Paul here again from the Citizens Assembly Working Group. So one of the offerings, it's kind of one of the entry-level offerings, is TalkShop, and TalkShop use cards like this one, like these, and they're very straightforward to use. So it's pretty much, if you follow the instructions on this card, the yellow one, it'll tell you exactly how to engage your group of 6. And you can just plonk it down in front of a group of 6, and then in theory they should just be able to follow the instructions. You can do this in large groups, so you could have lots of groups of 6, or just around a kitchen table with some of your friends and family. So the way it works is that you read this first instruction card, and the information that you're going to be discussing in this case is on the 3 other cards. So this first card, this is actually about citizens' income. So the first card will tell you what we're talking about, what it is. And then the second one tells you arguments for citizen income, and then the third card tells you arguments against. And the idea is that you're in groups of 6, and you'll give one of these cards to one pair, another card to the other pair, and the other card to the third pair, and then you have a bit of time for those pairs to digest their card. And then you, in your pairs, go around and you teach the card to the other members of the group. So in the case of your pairs, the first person might just read it out or do a summary of the card, and then the other pair can just say anything they found surprising, important, or unclear, and that just gets the conversation started. Okay, so once you've done that for all 3 cards, everybody's got exposure to all of the information, and then you're off on your discussion, your deliberation. And you can have as long as you want. You can take, half an hour max probably would be enough for this particular discussion. And then once you've finished, you summarize your results on this results card. You can see that there. So in this case, you're just saying, is citizens' income desirable, achievable, and could it gain political support to become law? And there's lots of different types of these cards. Another one here is on how Britain should be run. And these are very simple packs, but TalkShop also do more comprehensive discussion packs, which can take, rather than half an hour or 45 minutes, they can take 2 or 3 hours. So if you wanted a full deliberative discussion around something complex, like one of the ones at the moment is on the funding of social care, let us know and we'll arrange for those packs to be sent out to you, and along with the instructions on how to run those sessions. So there's a lot of research goes into them, so you're getting the experts via the cards, and yeah, it's a really fun and engaging way to have a deliberative discussion.
So I better check. Was that okay? Could you hear the sound? Okay, good. And oh, I've done it. Is that me? Just a second. Sorry, but I just couldn't stop Paul talking.
Oh. A common complaint.
Well, I cut off one video, stopped one video, and there was another one. Anyway, any immediate questions, or can I go on to show you a bit more about the things that Paul was talking about? Silence gives consent. I shall go on. So I'm going to share the screen again. And this time I'll go to the XR Democracy Hub and show you where you can find materials that Paul was referring to. So here is the tools section of the XR Democracy Hub. We've just watched the video, and now I'm going to click on Learn More. It takes you through to a page of the TalkShop website called Welcome to Extinction Rebellion. And if you scroll down, you'll see a table. May not be easy to read, but there's a set of titles down the left-hand side, how long they take, a link to a download if that's available, and when we updated those kits. So Paul referred to a set of cards. These are all sets of discussion cards on citizens' income. As Paul was referring to, this is the short version. You can use it for half an hour, 45 minutes. And let's click on download and see what happens. And here, in fact, are the cards to which Paul was referring. So the cards are double-sided. So you just need a sheet of A4 card and put it through the printer twice. These are the front sides. So as Paul said, there are instructions, top left, a general instruction, top right, arguments for citizens' income, arguments against. I might say that quite a lot of our materials do have a UK focus, but I think this one probably doesn't. By the way, there is the back of the cards, and here, top right, is the place for recording feedback, recording results that Paul waived. Do you think citizens' income is desirable? Do you think citizens' income is achievable? And do you think it could gain the political support in order to become law? And those are the backs of the cards. So very simple, and it's a cut down version of a longer kit. So let's go back, and above it is the full version of citizens' income. That takes 2 to 3 hours. It's much more elaborate. We don't have a download. We have some printed kits that we can send people if they so wish. And then what are the other topics? Some are more relevant to XR, others less. Driverless cars, the funding of social care, to which Paul referred. How should Britain be run? That probably is UK specific. Let's have a quick look at that. Here's again is the short version of this kit on how should Britain be run, also used by XR in the spring in London. Same as the other one. There were just 4 cards, 1 sheet of A4 paper, a set of instructions, and 3 different topics. How do we get government to take the long view? Should we replace representative democracy? And if so, what? And this one seems to have gone wrong. I'll have to have a look at that. Do we need to restrain the power of large firms and wealthy individuals? And if so, how? What happened to the front there? And you can see we've made a mess of it. We've put 2 sides together. So I'm glad we did this run through, because it shows me something I need to sort out. But we will sort that out. So that's the short version. And then just running on through the topics. Where are we? Intergenerational justice and new local politics. So this is a collection of examples from around the world of how different places are trying to do politics differently. And this would take a bit more printing to download the kit. There are 15 PDFs, each with 4 cards on. Let's have a look at one. So this particular set includes the Oklahoma Justice Project, rating the quality of council's debates, supporting referendum voters in Oregon, and the danger with referendums, how they can confuse. So that's a particularly, it happens that 3 out of those 4 examples are American, but actually the examples are from all around the world. So those are the current kits, and as I said, I hope at the end we can discuss what other topics might be useful. So there's a quick canter around what's available. So was that clear? Do you see how they work? Are the topics of interest? Over to you for whatever questions that you would like to ask, if any. Or we can have a very short webinar. Ola.
He was just saying thank you. So I think if you want to ask a question verbally, you can just put your finger up and then just come in, Liz, or you can do it in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. We're really are excited to find these resources. I was looking on the website trying to find exactly what you just showed. Was that the How Should Britain Be Run long version?
Yeah, so the first set of materials I showed was about citizens' income, and the second was indeed about how should Britain be run.
Okay, because when I click to download it, it's quite short and it doesn't have the American examples, which I would be very excited to share and use right away.
That was my fault. I went too quickly. So the American examples were from a different kit. They're further down the page, and it's called New Local Politics. So it's about what different places are doing. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks for asking. Peter and then James.
Unmute. So Perry, am I right in saying these are constantly updatable by the look of it? I mean, there's something that you can be constantly changing and adjusting and so on, the packs, or are they sort of, I mean, I know that some of them are printed, in which case there'll be a constant, that's slightly more challenging, but because I'm actually on the website as well, so as I can read it more clearly. And so, well, that's the question really, whether to what extent they can be adjusted and changed and updated as you go along.
I suppose there are two answers. Can they be and will they be? So you're absolutely right, they can be. Obviously, we've made a cock-up with the one of those cards I showed you. That needs sorting out. Yes, I mean, so we're particularly using the adult social care kit at the moment, and we realised that one of the options for funding social care in the UK was not properly explained. So we had the cards reprinted, some individual cards reprinted. I'm not sure we have the capacity to revise every kit, but of course there may be particular changes in the world that make our materials severely out of date, and then we will have to update them. But the main thing is that we put the date there so that you can see, judge for yourself whether they're out of date.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
James.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm probably just being really thick. But
No.
But when you had the first example, which I think was basically you had like 6 people and 3 cards, and so you had 6 people, 2 pairs, 3 cards, and basically that I could sort of grab that. But the last example, which looks interesting with all of those different things, is like 50 topics. So would you have 100 people, or would you just do them at random? Or I suppose what I'm driving at is each one of the cards. Initially, when you were explaining it, I understood the first card to be the kind of head topic, and the 2 to be 2 arguments on either side. Whereas, so I had that sort of structure. So you introduce the topic, you have the thesis and the antithesis or whatever, and then but the list of topics you've got at the end just looks like a list of topics with no arguments. So I'm just wondering how that works.
Thank you so much.
Unless I'm being really thick and I'm just not following.
No. You're just pointing out the inadequacies of my explanation. That's really helpful.
So,
all the kits are for groups of 6 people.
Okay.
So if you take the, but they are flexible. They are flexible.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah.
There is a lot of information in them, and we are trying to avoid information overload. That's one of the reasons why we use cards, because it means that you just have to deal with 1 or a few cards at a time. So that final one that Liz was talking about, the New Local Politics, that could be used by a single group, but because there are a lot of cards, it could also be, as it were, spread around among several groups.
Okay.
So, and with that kit, there's a separate set of instructions which are on A4. All these things I forgot to explain, and you've dragged out of me. It's really helpful. So the cards are designed, obviously, to help people think, in that case, about their area. So obviously, you look through them and you think, what of this is relevant to me? And it might be a mechanism, or it might be, I don't know, a feeling, a relationship that you'd want to create. So there's a process for saying, okay, what can we take from these cards and apply to our area? Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's, I'd say it's the usual story. Read the instructions as the RTFM, as we say in the trade.
And I'm happy to short circuit that process.
Yeah, no, we're very kind. Thank you,
John.
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering, like, it seems to me that the question of like what the format of the cards are is kind of an interesting one. I was wondering whether we could have like a card repository where kind of, okay, there's like a principal card that the Extinction Rebellion say, I don't know, recommends for the talk shops. But if after having the talk shop, some new points come up, you can kind of submit your own versions of that same card into a repository. So you have all these talk shops all over the place submitting modified, sort of changed versions of the card. And then maybe you could have like a Reddit system where you kind of upvote and downvote the different talking cards, so that if a new edition or whatever gets upvoted a lot, that could become like the new talking card, and that might be a way of that might be a way of sort of a kind of an organic method of editing the cards without complete information overload. Sort of crowd editing.
Wow, John, that's so much more sophisticated than anything I've ever thought about. What to say? So,
So you just allow. So you have your Extinction Rebellion talking cards, which are just you've got your standard Extinction Rebellion talking cards, and then you have a click that says click here for other versions. And then if someone wants to look at other versions, they can look at all the, a repository of other versions, and basically anyone can submit another version. It's not necessarily going to get to the front of the thing, but it's going to be in the repository. So people can submit an unlimited number of other versions, and then maybe you could have some kind of voting system where people can like vote up and down the cards if people feel one particular version is some versions are better than others. That would be a way of kind of an organic way of I don't know, allowing the cards to kind of evolve or whatever. You know Reddit, yeah?
Sure.
Yeah, that kind of system where different people have other versions, and there's just an up arrow, down arrow, like, dislike, whatever, and then the ones that have the most likes get rise to the top, and the ones that have the least likes fall to the bottom, that kind of thing.
Sure. The answer is I'd have to think about that. We might not have the capacity to do it. And I should say that these materials are used not just by Extinction Rebellion, they're used by a variety of groups. I can imagine that there might be two sorts of variations. So one would be...
I know how you could do it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you how to do it. It's really, really simple, actually. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, all you have to do is start a subreddit for each of the talking shops, because Reddit already exists. So you start a subreddit, and then on the website of the Extinction Rebellion, you put a link onto the subreddit, and then that's where so in each of the subreddits you link to each of the different versions, and then people just upvote and downvote the things on Reddit.
So what we do at the moment, which is, because we're simple people and do simple things, is simply prepare a draft version, test it out, see what people comment, and then prepare a final version. I can imagine there might be two sorts of variation. One would be, you've said something that's out of date because there's been some change in the world. But the others might be, well, I'd like to adapt this from a British setting to an American setting or Canadian setting or anywhere else. I think I wouldn't want to jump into that, John. I can see the value of it. I think it might take more time than we've got to manage. Can I have a think about it? I will have a think about it.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Hi, I wrote it in the chat. It's also, do you offer a topic about climate and ecological justice, which is the third demand, and or do you have or offer other resources for facilitating that discussion? I don't like speaking English. I don't like my voice. And also, I asked, is there a more extensive blueprint than the XR Guide to Citizens Assembly on how a Citizens Assembly on climate and ecological justice would be facilitated? Just if I can get some tools or resources for experimenting with this in Sweden, if you would offer some tools for that.
Thank you. Paul, will you answer on citizens' assemblies?
Yeah,
thank you.
fine. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, it's a great question. So Citizens Assembly, while it is part of the Future Democracy Hub initial offerings, it's very much, as you can see from the hub, it's a very advanced process. At the moment, XR's position is that generally that's done by professionals. There is a Citizens Assembly working group, and they're working with Citizens Assembly experts to push the third demand, and there's a third demand bill going through. There's all sorts of stuff happening in terms of facilitating a national Citizens Assembly. In terms of local Citizens Assemblies, we're not saying don't do them, but just be aware of the range of tools and pick the most appropriate tool for what you need to do. So that's the first thing I would say, is that if you're going to take on a Citizen Assembly, it's quite an undertaking. You're probably going to need to get professionals involved and support that. That doesn't mean to say it can't be done. Of course it can. It's done all over the world. But it could be that a different approach might be worth doing. But there is a lot of resources on the Extinction Rebellion page for Citizens Assemblies. So my recommendation would be we put you in touch with some of the professionals and look at those resources in the first instance.
Hi, Liz.
Hey, yeah, I just want to share what my understanding is of XR's relationship to citizen assemblies so that I can be corrected if it's not right. It is not our design that we will be hosting our own citizen assemblies because they need funding for facilitators and people's time, but that we are, like in the Citizens Assembly talk, we break the audience out into people's assemblies to explore the topics so that everyone gains literacy of citizen assemblies and becomes a better advocate for the government, whatever government entity we're contained in, to fund it. How close am I to what you have going on?
Yeah, I think that's quite a good description. So I think the People's Assembly is obviously a deliberative process that you can use in lots of different scenarios, but it gives people a flavor of taking part and participating in a deliberative session. Hopefully they will go there and be heard in a similar way that they could extrapolate and imagine what a citizens' assembly might be like. Obviously very different because you'd be there for, rather than hours, you'd be there for days, weeks, sometimes months. And it's a very in-depth process with lots of training along the way, lots of education and lots of deliberation. So it's very much the pinnacle of deliberative processes, which is why they tend to work at a national level. And that's why it's the third demand, because this is national, international level policy that we're looking at in terms of climate change. But yeah, your description was good. Elizabeth?
Yes, so I think both me and Ola is here from Sweden in the chat because we don't have the experience of having a national citizens assembly in Sweden. And what I'm doing right now is more like a seminar on it and not an actual citizens assembly. We won't have any political power. It's for learning from the process. And I would be very grateful if you would put me in touch with someone that has more resources or more information on how to facilitate this as an experiment. And yeah, thank you.
Can I just respond to that and then give the floor to Peter? So I've forgotten his name, but there's there's somebody who's made a very good film about the
Patrick Chalmers?
Say again?
Patrick Chalmers?
Patrick Chalmers. So he's made some good films about the Citizens Assembly, particularly in Ireland. And I'll try and fish out the link, or if someone else can find it, that would be great. Peter.
I was just going to say, yes, Google All Hands On. I'll see if I can find that in a moment. That's where the films are.
Okay.
That relate that cover that well. And Elizabeth, I've also copied you the link to the Sortition Foundation, who you may know, but Brett Hennig is very much the sort of the man who can lead you all that. And he was in Frome recently, where I live, and is enormously personable and helpful. And their desire is to see things done, if you see what I mean. So he's very, very much. I mean, they charge for what they do, but they're not in it as I see it. I mean, the impression I got from him was he just wanted this to be done. You know, he wants to see more citizens' assemblies happen, and is very happy to bend over backwards to help people to do that. So I'm sure he'd be delighted to talk to you.
Edwin.
Yeah, just had a question about the talk shop. How has it been implemented? I mean, how's it been going with the implementation and people using it, and sort of the overall experience, you know, sort of the practical implementation experience of people using it?
I'm sorry, I missed the point right at the start. Are you talking about
the talk shop? I've kind of gone back to the talk shop. In terms of the implementation, like, you know, actually using it, how's it been going with?
Sure.
Is it still kind of new for XR, or has it been used extensively, or just kind of wondering about the practicality of the implementation experience?
I'll say a little bit generally, and then Paul will say something about its use by XR. So another point I might have made is that the kits are designed that to be used, you know, without a facilitator, that we can send out the printed kits, for example, and I think of them as being like a murder mystery game. So you need someone to look through the kit and the instructions in advance and get their head around it, but it's not too complicated, I hope. And then people can run it for themselves. Sometimes we use these kits in larger events, and then maybe we supply a facilitator, maybe there's a local person who volunteers to act as the dealer, group leader on each table, and that works pretty well. Caroline, could you invite Paul to say a bit about how those kits were used by XR, and then I'll come back to you if I may.
Yeah,
Paul.
Thanks. Well, what's really great about the TalkShop kits in the context of XR is that during the rebellion, it's not easy to get the input before a deliberation. We did have some people's assemblies where we had lots of speakers, lots of experts coming along, and the amount of coordination that required is enormous. But you know, generally you would like to have some input before you get people to talk about something. But the great thing about the TalkShop kits is that you can just put some in your pocket and you go out to this is what I was doing, was going to some of the blockades, and you know, people sitting there for sometimes hours and hours on end. You know, it's not always action-packed stuff. They're really welcoming the ability to just engage on a topic, and in the process they get an experience of a deliberative process. So it's been really valuable, and we're hoping to do a lot more of that in October, and possibly include some of the more complex ones, so we can have a good old 2-hour discussion on something important.
Carolina, over to you.
I have actually 2 questions. First, I would like to, because it's, as I perceive it as a kind of educational tool, and I would like to learn about events you were using it before XR, so to speak.
Sure.
And another thing is how you verify the information you put on those cards. How you verify this input, where you take it from.
Sure. So on your first question, I'll just give 1 or 2 examples, and no, I'll leave you to tell me if I've answered your question. So in the UK, there is something called the University of the Third Age, self-organized groups. So they've used our materials quite a lot. Sometimes that's a group of 6 people sitting around somebody's kitchen table. We send them a kit. But equally, it's a very active group in the north of England, and they tend to get about 40 people to their meetings. They meet in a church hall. And so I went along a couple of times and helped them run a discussion on various subjects. And then I think the most recent one, they thought, well, now we can organize it for ourselves. And so I sent them the materials, and they had the experience to do it. On the Verify thing, what we tend to do for the more complex subjects is we do the basic research, but then we find some subject experts, usually academics, to check things out. So, for example, for the citizens' income material, there's something called the Citizens' Income Trust here. There's a person there. He's been working on citizens' income for almost as long as I've been alive. So that's that.
Malcolm Torrey.
Malcolm Torrey, exactly right. Thank you. If you take the New Local Politics kit, and that's really it's a collection of examples from around the world of what people are doing. So that really didn't need verifying. That was a different type of material. Did I manage to answer those questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ola.
There, unmute. Well, I have a question around the purpose of these cards. Are they meant to just for training purposes, or are they meant to create an opinion around the issue? And a second question, I was looking for material to do training in what I would call critical listening or source criticism or something like that. Is that something you provide?
Okay. Second question first. We don't explicitly seek to train people in how to listen. It's not in my head at the moment, but I think maybe some of the kits include some simple ground rules that we suggest that people apply, and listening well is one of those, but that's a very, very light touch. We don't go deeper than that. On your first question,
one more thing: the empathy circles. In their Democracy Hub website, there's a video on empathy circles, and in the empathy circles, there are very specific rules for how to conduct themselves in terms of listening. So if you're concerned about a particular clear procedure for listening, maybe you might want to start with an empathy circle, because there's fairly well defined rules for that. Yeah.
Yes, and Edwin, do you want to please say?
Yeah, I really see the talk shop and empathy circles working well together. I just see that having an empathy circle with the basic practice, that we could have cards that engage people in a dialogue using empathic listening. So I just see the two working really well together, and starting with empathy circles where you can talk about anything that's alive for you, but also take on a topic, with these cards. So I think it's a great combination.
Good, thank you. Yeah, that sounds great. Liz.
Is Mickey Cashchan's work on coaching for Extinction Rebellion something that's been made available to this group? I mean, it's public link, but I wonder if this new army of facilitators has been introduced to these kind of core, how can groups of people interact nonviolently training content?
Paul.
Not yet, because we're so new. But basically, absolutely, all of that stuff is possible. And maybe in answering to the other questions around, if there's things like that need to be brought in, then absolutely, it's brought in, and any one of us could facilitate that. And the discussion platform on Loomio is one way to bring that in, and then if that gets traction by a lot of people, you can see that that's obviously something that's needed. I was going to say the same answer to Elizabeth about inquiring about citizens' assemblies as well. There's lots of people who've got experience of citizens' assembly already linked into Loomio, so you may be able to get some good answers there. And it's a good question to ask anything like this, so that those answers can come through and other people can see them thereafter.
To say personally, I've been on a couple of Mickey Cashan's trainings in the UK and found them extremely valuable. I haven't answered Ola's first question yet. You asked if these were just about training or whether they were to gather people's opinions. They are indeed to gather people's opinions, and so when we first watched the video with Paul, Paul waved the little form on which we collect people's views on citizens' income. You know, did they think it was desirable? Did they think it was achievable? Did they think it'd be possible to muster the political support to bring them in? Now, in some cases, that's as far as it goes. For some of the other topics we've done, like on driverless cars, then we did indeed try and aggregate all the opinion we got. We ran about 50 events with about 600 people, and so we gathered the collective views of everybody and tried to send that to anybody we thought that would make a difference to. So it varies a bit by topic, but it's certainly not just education.
Ferry, I wonder if at this point would be a good time to just bring in the climate. You were talking about potentially bringing the climate-related pack.
Yes.
And then we can have any further questions after that,
sure.
if that's suitable.
So let me try the screen share again. So as I mentioned at the start, this is a slightly different type of tool, so I've kept it separate. Just a second. No. So same page on the TalkShop website. Up at the top is instructions for something called Climate Walk. So this is explicitly about climate change, and it turns a journey through time, i.e. our journey into the future, into a journey in space, a walk across a room or a field where people explore what may happen between now and, well, it's an arbitrary date really, but 2100. And people pause at various points and answer questions. There's two sets of questions, one about what changes they're prepared to make in their own lives, giving up flying, for example, and one set of questions about what changes they're prepared to allow the government to introduce that will affect their lives, such as carbon rationing. And so in the picture here, you can see a group of people showing by raising their hands that they're prepared to make a particular change, allow a particular change. And they also, at a couple of stages, throw dice, for example, to show if they've hit a climate tipping point. And that combination of their choices and chance decides whether in 2100 they end up in a world where the climate is 1.5 to 2 degrees warmer than pre-industrial times, 3 to 4 degrees warmer, or 5 to 6 degrees warmer. And you know, to the extent that we know, there's a chance then to explore what those might mean for life. And you'll see some instructions here. Just open the document. There were, it's not fantastically clear, there were two sets of instructions. Where it says many lines at the bottom, the bottom two sets of instructions, that's where there are several groups taking part at once. There's one set of overall instructions for the person who's looking after everything, and there's a separate set of instructions called group instructions for somebody who's looking after a particular group. But if you're only doing one group at once, that's the one-line instructions, then there's separate instructions there. So I hope that's not too fantastically confusing. Have a look through, and I hope it'll make sense. So there's a very different type of thing from the discussion kits. Just something that we've developed that helps people perhaps who haven't thought very much about climate change to explore how their position, what the changes they're prepared to do, sorry, let me try again. What we as a society decide to do, how that may affect the climate. Again, did I manage to explain that at all? No. Oh, yes, I did. It was a shake of the head, Peter. I was worried.
Sounds great.
Okay. So, as Paul said, if you've got any questions about that, or we can continue the discussion, and then Paul and I have a couple of questions for you when you're done with us.
The climate walk seems very sophisticated. I'd be reluctant to start off doing a climate walk. I think the most important initial thing to do is to actually get in touch with people in our locality. Do you have any like if I gave you my location, would you be able to hook me up with an initial nucleus of people in Peterborough?
So we don't have. TalkShop doesn't have a database of people who use our materials, I'm afraid. Paul, you got any suggestions?
No, that's one of the biggest inquiries that we were all having to face, John, I think, isn't it? Is how do we get people to take part in these kind of things when they belong to a very disaffected population in terms of political engagement. We put sessions on and then people show up. Sometimes greater numbers, sometimes lesser numbers. One of the things about the TalkShop packs is that you can actually just get a group of friends together and give it a go, and then go from there. I think it's the learn by doing approach.
Okay, so just find so you don't have a database of people, so I just have to find people who are interested in the Extinction Rebellion or transition towns or something like that and chat to them, that kind of thing. Okay.
They don't have to be interested in XR also, they can just be people.
Okay, so interested in talking about stuff. Okay.
There's plenty out there.
Paul, what are the questions we want to ask?
Yeah, there's a couple. Can you see yourself using this? And then a more general one, which is one we've been wanting to ask for a while, is, are there any suggestions for topics? So can you see yourself using this, and any suggestions for topics? Ola.
Thank you. I could very well consider using them. I have actually, or I am preparing a similar material on the subject of high-speed trains, which is a very relevant question here in Sweden. And I think I'm pretty much on the same route as you are. However, I still have this question about how to train the groups into dissecting the information they get and sort of critically analyze it.
I don't know what to say to that, really. I think I find that the cards encourage a constructive conversation. Everybody has something to contribute from the cards that they hold. There's a clear structure. We try and make the kits look like a game because people are familiar with games. So we don't.
Absolutely, I fully agree with that. But in full-on citizen assembly situation, the participants will be subjected to experts from either side that will try to persuade them into believing this particular expert's view on things. And a critical aspect of all this is to be able to critically analyze what somebody is saying, in my view.
Sure. All I can say, I think in the way that Edwin talked about the compatibility of empathy circles with TalkShop, this is not it doesn't do everything by any means. I'm trying to explain what I think its limits are, and it may well be that you need something else for that. But what I would say is that people who've taken part in the past have said that their attitude to experts has changed a bit. They've become a little less trusting of experts because the material has shown them that, to quote a modern proverb, for every expert there is an equal and opposite expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to see your materials on high-speed trains, and I can always put them into Google Translate. Carolina, I think you wanted to say something.
A few things. First of all, I would like to use those cards in Empathy Circle to kind of, empathy. There is a lot of prejudice about Empathy Circle, at least here in Poland. I think that most of people see this method as a kind of emotional regenerative tool for people in distress and that sort of things, which is true, but it is also very useful tool for more intellectual discussion. And those cards are a great tool to show it, I think. So I would like to use it here, obviously in Polish version, that's my concern. But another thing is, if that's a tricky thing, how to create, well, maybe I lost some ideas because I experienced some connections problems from time to time, so I don't hear everything. But did you think about making such a TalkShop kit about Future Democracy project and about XR?
On your first question, there is an EU website which has a version of these discussion kits in 30 different languages. So people have taken whatever the original language was, translated it, and then put the translation back up on this site. I may not be able to find that immediately. Paul, where would I put that? Where would I post that? Could I post it on Loomio?
Yeah, I think that would be best. If you open up a thread related to TalkShop and then, yes, put it in there in one of the replies.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure there'll be some Polish examples, so that's useful. So could we just collect some ideas and we'll have a think about it? Sure.
Yes. Just one idea to Carolina. If there's prejudice about empathy circles in Poland, maybe one thing you can do is just call them something different and keep the exact same rules. Like, yeah, you can keep the same rules that are empathy circles, and except call them something other than empathy circles, and then people will be less prejudiced to them.
Edwin.
Yeah, it could be called democracy circles or something like that, right? So I think you had asked about questions in one of our empathy circle groups. We had created a Facebook poll. So, and then we had just started posting a bunch of questions, and then people could add their own questions. So it was a way of generating topics for the empathy circle. So that's just one way to generate, and plus you can kind of see which one is the most popular too.
Yes, sure.
There is a thread on Loomio with that exact question.
Right.
So there's been a bit of engagement, but could do with a few more suggestions.
Paul, I think we're almost done. Do you want to say a bit more about October?
Yes. Don't know whether people have signed up to be in the Facilitator Army. I think some of you probably have. I haven't got the list in front of me right now. Forgive me if you have. And some I know have signed up to help out in the October Rebellion facilitating. So we're going to be in touch in the next week regarding anybody who's ticked that particular box. But one of the things that we're hoping to do is to be able to provide deliberative sessions to those that want them. There's obviously a lot of planning in terms of what big splash type events we could have, particularly around Parliament, particularly around the fact that it's currently out of is in prorogation, and all the stuff around Brexit. It would be very symbolic to actually to put on some events which are demonstrably deliberative and inclusive, particularly where Parliament isn't sitting in the building next door. And it would be nice to be able to provide the talk shop kits, for example. I think that, as I've said earlier, they're very adaptable to use in very unusual situations. So you could sit down in the middle of the road and have a conversation. We've done that in April. And then I think the climate walk is one that we could do, and also the local democracy 60 cards to get people to start thinking about the ones they like about those. Lots of potential, I think. So we're going to be working with the people who volunteered to support them in helping out on those. Just another thing is that there's also a need for facilitators to help the decision-making process of the rebellion itself. There's quite an in-depth process that is being developed or has been developed, which involves a lot of facilitators there. So there's plenty of opportunity for doing good democratic decision-making in the rebellion, and hopefully that will also help get into the DNA of the people who are taking part, and they will then go back out to their communities where hopefully the Future Democracy Hub will be able to support them even further to embedding some of these things that many of us here today have already been trying to do for many years.
Carolina.
I just want to ask if where are the sources where I could learn more about this inner XR process of making decisions, where you're working on it, and if there is any place I can learn about it. Any suggestions?
If you email me and we can have a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
And Paul, if people are so keen that they want to watch the recording as well, what do they do?
The recording of this, I guess we'll put it on to the Lumio platform, which you can access directly via the hub. If you didn't know that already, I will send you a link, Peter. And we might put it on to some of the Facebook groups as well, so people can see that if they want to. They weren't able to make it along. Probably needs to be edited a little bit first, but then we'll do that.
So,
I have a quick question. As there is an existing Extinction Rebellion facilitators group that has a basic training, kind of like what I think people were asking about, like what are the basic ground rules if we're going to start to get a group of people interacting with each other in conversation and listening? What are the basic rules? And there is an existing training. Can you explain how that may or may not relate to us here?
Yes. So they're kind of not linked at all at the moment, but the facilitator training that's been provided so far has been obviously directly related to the needs of the organization. So people getting trained up in how to facilitate local group meetings. Obviously now a lot of work is going into training people to facilitate decision making and just the organization of the rebellion itself. So that's something that people are being trained to do. And you know, there's the exciting thing about the Future Democracy Hub is that there's a lot of people who are not necessarily already involved with Extinction Rebellion as a facilitator, but a lot of experience of facilitating, who are now coming forward, and so we can bring those guys in. And today I was having conversations with different people in XR about what the needs are, and so those people who've come forward already will be having those conversations, and to some extent they can decide where they want to go to support. But we will obviously be also looking to run some deliberative sessions. Whatever's needed, we're going to need to be quite flexible in terms of how we support people overall. But obviously, long term, the facilitator army is not just about working within XR; it's about working within the entire culture and bringing these tools out, and that in turn promotes the deliberative suggestions at the highest level in terms of citizens' assemblies.
One question: can we swap groups? Like let's say like I'm in Peterborough and I'm one of the facilitator armies, and I gather a group of people together who kind of meet regularly in Peterborough, and then someone else in Cambridge has another little group. Can we kind of swap so that I facilitate the Cambridge group and he facilitates the Peterborough group, or that kind of stuff, to create some, I don't know, some kind of diversity in facilitation, so that facilitators so that each facilitator gets a better idea of the variation of different opinions over a wider area, and at the same time, the groups, by having different facilitators, kind of aren't sort of monopolized by one person.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And it's a perfect example of how the movement of facilitators will evolve. So things will become apparent as you engage and you think, well, actually now I really need to learn about this. How do we get that next challenge? How do we reach the people who are seldom included? How do we learn expand our skills as facilitators? And you gave some good examples of the way that could happen, I'm sure.
Are we done?
I think maybe we might be. Unless Edwin, did you have a question?
Oh, I just put in a link for our Empathy Cafe tomorrow. It's every Friday. It's a good way to take part in an Empathy Cafe, and you learn the practice, and you can just become a facilitator sort of by doing it. And there's a link there. We made it, yeah.
Yeah, that's also now on the Future Democracy Hub site as well. So you can go directly to that page, which I'm sure you all know now. And there's a link directly to that just on tomorrow. Brilliant. Anything else you want to say, Perry, to finish up?
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say other than big thank you for coming, and thank you for Perry coming along and explaining everything that you've been doing. It's amazing stuff. I'm excited about the potential of some of those packs we haven't used before on the Rebellion, and getting those going and seeing how they work. Stay in touch, guys. Go on to Loomio. There's lots of, if you've got a question, stick it down there. Somebody will come in and answer it in time. And keep engaging. And we'll be in touch regarding future events. And you'll all be welcome to come to those.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for your hosting.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.